On today's episode of Podaria, I will be speaking with Carson Morell. Carson is co-founder and chief operating officer at Arcbound. Arcbound is a comprehensive personal branding firm dedicated to initiating and fostering the success of entrepreneurs, leaders, innovators, and creative individuals. Carson's expertise in operations and development is instrumental in enabling startups to flourish, helping individuals establish significant connections, and empowering professionals to shape their distinctive personal brands. In our dialogue, we explore the realms of startup expansion, personal branding, and networking. Without further ado, this is my conversation with Carson. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode, and I just want to dive right into it. So I want to start by discussing the general concept of personal branding. So for those of the listeners that might be new to the concept, how would you define personal branding, and why do you think it's relevant today?
Yeah, absolutely. Personal branding, pretty straightforward. What is the brand that you embody as an individual? What are the values, the themes that run true regardless of what you do in your life? It might be your work, your personal life, your hobbies. At the end of the day, you're the common denominator. And so what makes up that brand is your personal brand. Why is it important today? I always like to say, like, personal branding's been around for years, right? You have King Tut building pyramids that we still hear about today. You have Dr. Martin Luther King, incredible brand and thought leadership. The stories that come from it, again, they ring true and will continue to ring true for centuries. People have been buying into people for as long as civilization has been around. Government, cities, businesses, organizations, religions, right, all grow through personal brands. And so it's no different today. The difference is that it's accessible. It's that it applies to more things than just building a civilization, a government, an organization. But it's true in your life and in your work. And again, it's accessible. You don't need to build a pyramid. You can create a LinkedIn post, and it looks far different. But again, people buy people. And if you want to build a product or get a job or start a business, whatever it might be, people buy you, and then they buy what you're selling. And it's highly important in both the digital environment, but also in real life.
I think it's interesting that you bring up that the whole concept of personal branding has really been around a lot longer than most people probably think of, especially since nowadays social media being a huge driving factor in creating and then nurturing a personal brand. It just seems to be a newer age idea and concept of like kind of marketing yourself, but the reality of it being that it stems from so long ago and continues to be a huge part in a lot of people's lives. So that's very important. And, going from there, there's a huge concept of authenticity versus creating an image in the social media, personal branding, networking, all the whole world of sort of creating an image. What do you think about having to maintain authenticity during creating content or networking or kind of putting yourself out there, but also maintaining an identity of your own? And then that too, at the same time as navigating a lot of change. So for example, the digital age, there's a lot of change that comes with that. There's a lot of change that comes with moving trends and shifts in a lot of different industries. So how do you sort of maintain that groundedness throughout the whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. So to speak to the first piece, authenticity versus creating an image, I think people can sniff out when you're not being yourself, you're not being authentic. And at the end of the day, the brands that do the best are the ones that are unique. They're the ones that people haven't seen before. People are attracted to things that are new and different. And if people feel like they get the same content or the same experience from you that they get from 5, 10, 15, 20 other people, you're probably not standing out at all. And the way to combat that is to bring your full self to the table. I always say when I'm talking about the creator economy that the brands that combine seemingly unrelated industries, topics, themes A, are the most authentic, but or B, are the most differentiated and are the ones that are doing well. So think Ryan Reynolds buying Mint Mobile. You're combining acting and entertainment with business and thought leadership. Kevin Durant, angel investing. You're combining professional athletics with business, with investing. Serena Williams with her venture fund. Same thing. The list goes on. And the reason we know those brands is because they are appealing to multiple industries. And so you bring yourself to the table. Maybe you're the accounting is your day job, but you love fly fishing and you're the fly fishing accountant. People are going to remember that more so than an accountant or somebody who's super into fly fishing, right? So how do you differentiate like that? And then to your question about change, don't change your brand as things are evolving. At the end of the day, you're you, and that shouldn't change. And if you want to maintain that authenticity, you need to stick to those foundational elements of who you are and your brand. However, the channels you use to distribute or market or exist in the world, those change, right? As we said earlier, it's not pyramids and it's LinkedIn posts that you're making now. You might be on a podcast, you might be building a newsletter, you might be going to events. And in 6 years, you might be building your brand in virtual reality, right? We don't know what it's going to look like. The brand doesn't change. You're still you. You still care about the same things, or you take a similar approach to things and keep that consistent. The channels change. That's where you need to be adaptable. But don't let a trend on a channel fundamentally change who you are and how you bring yourself to the table.
I think it's very important that you mentioned sort of that deep dive into almost human psychology in terms of putting yourself out there and how there are differences in a lot of people's investments nowadays, where there be celebrities doing different endorsements for brands that are almost completely seemingly unrelated to what it is that they do. So that's very interesting, and I think a very different concept for a lot of people to sort of digest, because if anything, I feel like having a more nuanced like company or a nuanced program, any sort of nuanced initiative, is it might feel like it's a lot harder to kind of put that out there because there's so many differences within that organization or company, but in reality, it's that what makes it appealing to the general public. And so that's very interesting. What are some common misconceptions that people might have about personal branding, and what are some challenges that people face right now when working on their personal brand?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. There's a couple misconceptions. I think one is that like personal branding means making content. Personal branding means being a guru or out there all the time. No, it doesn't. Personal branding can exist just in person. It can be just again the values and the mission that you have for yourself doesn't need to be content. Second misconception is that everybody needs to be out there building their brand online. Same thing. No, you don't. Doesn't matter. If that doesn't feel right to you, don't do it. You need to enjoy it. You might enjoy building your brand in a private dinner series or just spending time with people that you like. You don't need to strive to build a following. Is it super valuable? Absolutely. But it needs to make sense both for you as an individual and whichever entity you're trying to drive results back to. So I think those are kind of the key ones that stand out. I think another piece, just in terms of how branding has changed, we're kind of coming out of this era where personal branding is cliche or kind of cringe, and you've got these online gurus. It isn't necessarily that by any means, and you can create tasteful content that is aligned to who you are and doesn't sacrifice any core pillar of what you want to be bringing to the table. And I think it's important to remember that nobody's forcing you to do it, and it can look however you want it to look.
Yeah, and definitely as personal branding continues to become a bigger part of many people's lives and careers, it's very important to be able to stay grounded in that sense, and having authenticity in who you are throughout whatever initiative that you're taking is such a valuable thing to sort of digest and learn from. Moving on to your career and your work journey, you had to start in operations. So in terms of working experience, how was that like, learning about oversight, learning about other management things while moving into sort of this entrepreneur landscape where you're creating?
Yeah, great. Yeah, great question. Happy to dig into that. Operations is definitely has been a common theme for all the work that I've done. I would say that I think the generalist nature of the work I've done is really where things are truly consistent. Early stages operations, especially for early stage businesses, operations just whatever needs to get done to keep things moving and get things on track. I really thrive in the 0 to 1 phase, getting things off the ground. And because I'm a generalist, I'm able to do a lot of things well enough to get things moved on. My first jobs were in service industry, deli, coffee shop, and then got involved with entrepreneurship through some collectibles trading and selling some milk delivery that I did in high school, motorcycle buying and selling with a friend. Those were kind of my first initial experiences with entrepreneurship, and then working with your brother on Otari and Tholio was one of those first moments where I got exposed to some more technical elements on the development side, the data side that were interesting to me, and I think really helped open up that this could be a path that I would move forward with. And then I would say more current era, of course, is Arcbound, and joining Arcbound almost 5 years ago, starting it with my business partner Brian Wish. I think that's where I got to bring all those pieces together. Getting things off the ground, putting things together, doing whatever needed to get done to take things off the ground. And we've been very fortunate to be able to get as far as we have with Arcbound, and then of course had the blessing to be able to go and work with a collectible store that I grew up going to, and got to apply those learnings from Arcbound over there and grow that business about 6x in 2.5 years, which was awesome and rewarding. But again, it kind of comes down to that 0 to 1 generalist nature. I'm not the best operator. I'm not the best visionary. I'm not the best anything. But I think being good enough on a number of things to be dangerous is where I've been able to thrive.
Yeah, as someone who also appreciates being able to dive into many fields or many different things at once, I feel like I really appreciate this idea that despite not kind of centering around like one specific thing for career or for your journey, it doesn't have to be that way. You can really branch out and take advantage of having that generalist nature, being exposed to many, many different fields and people and concepts at once can be something that you can really learn from. So it's very important. And, speaking of Arcbound, can you tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind Arcbound?
Yeah, absolutely. All credit goes to my business partner, Brian. Brian had started the business shortly before I joined him, and we ended up restructuring and co-founding it together. But at the end of the day, it's his brainchild and his genius that has brought it to life. Brian worked with an author who was in the process of exiting his business, launching his book, and was working with a number of different vendors to build his personal brand, market and sell his book. And at the end of that, we call him Client Zero. At the end of that, Brian identified an opportunity to do all these things in-house in one place. What are the time savings, the resource savings that come with not having to work with 5 or 6 vendors to build your personal brand, to develop your thought leadership? And so that's really where the idea started. And then we began with a very simple LinkedIn content offering, and that expanded to social channels, newsletters, podcasts, book ghostwriting, websites, design, speaking, community, everything you could need to support a thought leader or somebody building their personal brand at every step of the way, while giving them the economies of scale that come with working with one vendor.
I really like the use of the words thought leader, and I feel like that's a very different term than what people might have already been exposed to, and a unique way of describing an individual or a company. And can you just tell us a little bit more about sort of what thought leader means? I feel like it's a very new term to me, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. The definitions I'd say are still kind of solidifying in the market. Personal brand and thought leadership are not necessarily synonymous at all. Thought leadership is being the expert and owning a particular domain of information, because you are well positioned and credible to be able to do so. So building a brand might help you establish your thought leadership. Creating thought leadership content might help you build your brand, but companies have thought leadership content. They publish articles about industries. They do deep dive reports and publish white papers. That's thought leadership. And so you might be a thought leader in DEI, and your personal brand might benefit greatly from that. It might be one of the core pillars of your personal brand. So they are closely tied, but again, not necessarily interchangeable.
Thank you for sharing. Moving into what the market research kind of looks like in such a nuanced field that is, this thought leadership and all these companies and creators. Like, how are you sort of conducting market research and judging? Like, what indicators are you looking for? What might some market research look like? How are you sort of judging all these different factors?
Yeah. I think most of our market research just comes from being in the space all the time. We spend a lot of time with our clients, with potential clients, with other creators, with other founders, and we listen, we take feedback, we get ideas, and we've really let the market guide us to this point. Um, Again, it's a nascent subsector of the creator economy, and things are still starting to come together. However, if you look at the competitive landscape, there are new competitors popping up who offer ghostwriting services for a couple social platforms or for newsletters. And so, everything tells us that we're heading in the right direction. There's a lot of demand for this kind of work. And of course, things like pricing and what do we do versus what does the client do, a lot of those pieces are determined based on customer feedback, based on what we're seeing in the market, but it's fast moving, and still constantly getting our bearings and figuring out where we stand, where we need to go. There is a lot of research that's been done in the creator economy specifically, but I would say this more professionally focused sector is less explored, and there's less data that exists. Something that we are doing is building those data sets ourselves to be able to create predictive analytics for clients to start to figure out what are the trends. You look at things like public companies and the followings of their C-suite executives in relation to the market caps of those companies. There are tons of insights to be pulled from that, but it's just the tip of the iceberg right now and figuring out what that all looks like.
I think it's amazing that Arcbound is sort of acting as this pioneer in such an interesting industry, where so much is evolving and continuing to evolve. So that's really great. And especially in this digital age, I feel like you just can't keep up fast enough with almost anything. So it's very interesting to hear about how you are navigating all these different things that are going on. And speaking of sort of Arcbound and its journey and its growth, you have a lot of different clients that you work with very regularly. So how do you go about being adaptable, working with different clients, and especially since every single client has their own story, has their own idea of what they want to put out there, they have their own initiatives and companies. So how do you navigate all these nuances, pretty much?
Yeah, great question. Typically, clients we work with fit into one of a number of different buckets. We typically categorize our clients by their roles. So we work with a lot of executives of large public and private companies. We work with investors, so it might be venture capital partners, it might be private equity partners, it could be venture-backed founders who are earlier stage. It could be an Ivy League professor, a best-selling author. And so based on those different categories, we know why a client's coming to us. A venture capitalist comes to us for access to limited partners or growing their exposure to drive more limited partner relationships. It could be for deal flow. It could be more allocation on the deals they're getting. And it could be talent for their portfolio companies versus an author who's really looking to grow their following, get speaking opportunities, sell books, courses, consulting, coaching engagements, whatever it might be. And so we know, again, based on what somebody does, why they're coming to us and what's going to be valuable to them. To your point about adaptability, all of these people are different, but there are a few things that are common amongst all of them. One is they're very busy, and as much of the work that we can do, the better to make it easy on them. They are all incredibly intelligent and smart and good at what they do. And so we have to lean into their expertise to really drive forward that thought leadership, but also keep them focused on what matters and what works and what doesn't, and guide them on that journey. I think that's a big piece of it. And then last piece on nuances and managing that, expectations are huge. Different personal brands take different amounts of time to come to fruition, based on a number of different factors. And as long as the client's playing the long game, we always get there. But it takes time to stand these things up and truly build them.
And I think it's great that you're able to sort of foster and aid throughout this whole entire process of being able to market yourself, your company, your book, whatever it may be, that people are coming to you with. So it's very amazing to hear about. And, you know, as this company has continued to grow, what are some milestones that you've sort of really looked back and been like, hey, like that was really crazy. That happened. That's something to celebrate. What were some of your favorite moments till date, I guess?
Yeah. Definitely fun question to think about. I think there's a lot of those moments that are repetitive. I'd say every few months the team gets bigger and we look and we're like, wow, we got a lot of people relying on us, but also, very fortunate to be able to have built something that is providing so much to so many different people. There are big name clients that will close, and that's always exciting. I think one of the things that's nice, not in the moment, but in hindsight, is being able to recover from really difficult moments in company history early on, maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. We lost a third of our revenue due to a unforeseen circumstance, and recovering from that, I look back and it's like, wow, we did that. We made it through that. And it's nice to be able to look back on those difficult moments and pat ourselves on the back, and then again, look around at how far we've come, and be proud of that. But I think there's something to be said about entrepreneurs in general, and I think we're ultimately never satisfied with the progress. Not even entrepreneurs specifically, but high performers. So it's important you pause and give yourself some credit when you can.
Yeah, it's a lifelong growth journey and just continues to go and go. So, being a part of such a fast growing startup, what was your growth journey like? And did your priorities ever change? And if so, how did they change? How did they adapt? Sort of what was that journey like in terms of being with this startup, from getting it off the ground, getting it to where it is today, everything related to that?
Yeah. You're constantly reinventing yourself, and you have to have as little attachment as possible to what role you play in the organization. You can't get in the way of the organization and progress. And at the end of the day, the business won't grow faster than the leadership team grows as individuals. And so again, you need to be willing to change and adapt and let go of things, whether it feels good in the moment or not. I think that's been a big piece of it, and why we've been able to get so far is that we don't have that attachment to some of those things. And then just constantly making sure that we're challenging ourselves and taking feedback and having the hard conversations. I think that's really the hard part of all this, and being able to push through that is important. In terms of priorities, I don't think the priorities change. They change in terms of what you're focused on in the business, but if you look big picture, the priority has always been to build this business and vision where we want to take it, and we keep that in mind as we move forward. Of course, you have weekly priorities, quarterly priorities, yearly priorities that you focus on, and those do change. Early days priorities were maybe hitting certain client targets, and then as you get bigger, they get more granular. Maybe it's learning and development for the team, or it's recruiting strategies or team retention strategies, right? So it gets more specific in different pain point areas of the business, and just keep focusing on those most important pieces.
I think that's very valuable insight on how that journey might look like for your company. And it could be similar to a lot of other stories out there on sort of taking any sort of fast growing startup and really maintaining that full force and full effort throughout the whole journey. So it's very important. And, moving into sort of this last section of today's podcast, how do you see the future of personal branding? Like, how do you see it evolving? How do you see it changing? Any things that might be on the come up?
Yeah, I think mostly just go back to some earlier points. One is just the personal brands that differentiate the most are the ones that are going to do best. We talked about a few brands that combine two seemingly unrelated industries. There are going to be personal brands that combine 3, 4, 5 different elements. And there are a number of creators who are already doing it. You could look at somebody like Mr. Beast, who started with YouTube content creation and has now moved into fast food, consumer packaged goods, philanthropy, right? And the more dimensions your brand has, the further you're able to take it, the larger the audience you're able to reach. And that'll continue to be a trend and a pattern. The platforms are going to change. What those are going to be in the future, you don't know. Like you said, it moves too quickly to really know. I think what's most important is that you adapt as soon as these changes arise. In the immediate term, I think one of the trends that I've seen is that we've spent so much time over COVID getting really good at building our brands online, but now's the opportunity to build your brand in person through events, through dinners, through attending any number of in-person activities. And the brands that are doing that, I think, are going to stand out. And we actually have come to underestimate the value of reaching 20 people in person versus 1,000 people online. And again, I think we're going to see a lot more of that. And it's no different than companies, rushing to become digital first, direct to consumer. And now you see direct to consumer brands looking to open up brick and mortar locations, because both matter. And we've over indexed on digital and under indexed on in person. And so I would expect kind of a correction there to come up, where people are putting more emphasis in person because there's more opportunity. It's less saturated to host events that people want to go to. And that's something as a company, as an individual as well, that we and I are leaning into to continue to get in front of more of the right people.
I think this overarching idea of diversification, both in thought and action, is something that we all hear a lot lately, and it's very important. Even just my last episode, when I was talking to Courtney Worthy, who is a professional in the field of data privacy, another thing that even she mentions is, hey, like, even if you're looking into the legal field versus the tech field versus the privacy field, having this sort of, going back to your previous idea of, having a general interest in many things can almost take you at a different level in comparison to people that might be focusing on a niche, or people that might be focusing on just a single pronged effort versus kind of being able to spread yourself and, see, hey, this is something I'm interested in combining with something else. And, I think it's very valuable for people that are listening, especially those of, younger generations that are kind of starting to pick up their careers, trying to pick up what they're interested in now, to look into, hey, that there's different fields that I can pursue, and it doesn't have to be a single niche that they have to follow through, for the entirety of their careers. And speaking of giving advice and, people that are out there wanting to build their own personal brand or create their network, build a network, what advice do you have? You already touched on this a bit, I know, but any other advice to give to young people that are looking to build their personal brand?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're starting from scratch right now in this point in time, bring people together in person and funnel them out to your digital channels. Host an event, host a dinner, host anything. Get people together. People are craving in-person interaction. Get together in person, be the person that brings people together, and then channel people back to your LinkedIn, your Instagram, right? You're going to get everyone's phone number. Hey, how do we connect after this? Oh, grab me on LinkedIn, and then go follow them on Instagram. And you'll be surprised that, just like with advertising, right, where the or with sales, where the lead comes from makes all the difference. And so if you think about that in terms of followers or audience, a follower who came from an event that you hosted, that you met, is going to be more engaged with you digitally. And so if you want really high quality, build that really high quality foundation, I would do it through in-person events. And then back to the authenticity thing, that's the most important. Be yourself, do what you like to do, talk about what you want to talk about, and make content that you'd want to consume. I think a lot of people don't do that. If there's a type of content that you would love to watch every day and you're capable of creating it, go make it. Don't just do what everyone else is doing. So yeah, those are my my thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. That's such valuable insight. And especially that last point there about creating content that you would yourself would want to consume. I think even the original inspirations behind the podcast, listening to a lot of Huberman Lab, listening to a lot of Rich Roll, listening to a lot of Lex Friedman, there's just a lot of different inspirations that are kind of tying together. And I think that's something a lot of people can learn from. That you don't have to be just the consumer of all these thoughts and ideas, but even being someone that can produce this, creators that are putting things out there, is such a valuable and key thing to learn throughout your career, throughout your journey. And it's just very insightful for you to be sharing all this with us today. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. And I hope that everyone is able to take away a lot of key things about kind of putting yourself out there, putting your company out there, growing, what it looks like to be an entrepreneur in this digital age, and learning from all these different factors that are out there, and continuing to learn, continuing to grow. So thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. And yeah, hope that people can continue to learn, and speaking with people like you who are just such experts in your field, and being able to share this new insight that might be unheard of elsewhere. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. This was great.